Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Matches United podcast. I'm the host, as always, Phil Bryant, joined with my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes. I hope you're all enjoying the Euros, and I hope you had a nice Father's Day, mate. How was your weekend?
Yeah, it was very nice. Good Father's Day. We got out to like a baseball game over the weekend just to get outside. I don't really care much to watch them, but it's a fun day out, and caught up on some of the matches over the weekend as well, which were pretty entertaining, I think, for the most part. How about you?
You know what? I actually spent Father's Day in bed, sick. I'm not feeling the
Oh no.
best. I'm not feeling the best. Woke up on Sunday feeling quite rough, actually. And still not feeling great. But hopefully it's not coming down or anything. But
Yeah.
yeah, so most of yesterday I was in bed feeling like shit, unfortunately. But you know what? Sometimes lying in bed doing nothing for a day, which is a privilege rarely afforded to parents, is the best
Yes.
way to spend a Father's Day, because it was quite nice to be able to just lie there and not do anything. But yeah, no, it was nice. I hope everyone listening to this had a nice Father's Day. And hope it all went off well. Fathers, such a vital part in our society, sometimes underappreciated, but you know, it's a hard job and no one does it perfectly. So I hope you all had a great Father's Day. Um, we, of course, as we said, we're joining the Euros. Lots of United news in between. Some interesting comments from Eric Ten Hag this weekend, which I found quite funny. Um, some of which endeared me a little more to him, which I kind of like. The Ten Hag version, this Ten Hag version of, you know, a bit more aggressive and going on the front foot, being very, very precise in how he claps back, slaps back. I did quite like some of his comments. Um, Obviously, lots of transfer rumors about different players. We'll get into that too, and some other United related news. We'll take some of your questions that we tweeted out. So thanks for getting back to us. First of all, we'll talk about those Ten Hag comments. Lots of people saw himself in those comments. But I have
Hmm.
to say, the stuff that he said about, I mean, this is what you expect from a Dutch guy. They have this level of self confidence about, they talk to people and found that they already have the best manager. I found that was funny, and actually I quite liked it. And then the part about them interrupting his holiday on his doorstep, which was quite funny, and his comments about Gareth Southgate. What do you think of them?
I thought it was pretty interesting. I think his analysis of the game was correct. Um, Sometimes I looked at a few of his comments and I said, I just wonder if he analyzed his own coaching last year in a similar way because there's some similarities on things he was critiquing with what we also saw at United in the last year. That being said, yeah, he was a little bit snarky, and quite honestly, I think he has a bit of every right to be. After everything that's kind of gone on over the last few weeks and coming back to it, he probably feels a bit settled, a bit secure. I think in some respect, United can't really do much. You know, at this point in time, from their end, so he probably is feeling pretty good after everything, and obviously that self confidence and self belief is something you can see in Ten Hag all the time. That he has in certainly in spades, maybe sometimes too much, maybe just the right amount. I guess it depends where he ends up, but most of those comments were fine, and I thought his analysis of the game was correct. I think is most of our feelings about watching the England game probably reflected what he was saying as well.
Well, I think one thing that was quite interesting was his comments on his contract, which he
Hmm.
says is still to be agreed, and there's work to be done on that, um, which tells me that maybe there isn't complete agreement on how he's going to do his
Hmm.
job, which is surprising to me, James, because surely when you're determining whether Ten Hag is the right guy or not, you're also determining whether he's willing to work within your structure or not. You know, and so now what Ten Hag might be saying is, "Are you the right guy for me?" And
Hmm.
so this is going to be really, really interesting. I assume that there was broad agreement between Ten Hag and Ineos on what those conditions were. I wouldn't imagine that we would have a financial obstacle to renewing that contract. Um, that was quite interesting to me.
Yeah, well, obviously it's a little bit tricky because as far as I'd understood and had heard for quite some time, whether he was the right guy to fit in that structure was probably the kind of almost the original impetus for looking at another manager in the first place. Ineos have been looking at managers since before they even got into the club, just on that basis, because it's sort of ordinary with the takeover, with new management, new people, new ideas. They didn't hire Ten Hag when they, of course, and he's definitely not on terms that fit the way that they want to do things moving forward. That much is obvious. I think that in a lot of respect, and without disrespecting Ten Hag on this, because it's not even trying to do that at all. My concerns are much more with them at the moment on how this has all played out than him. One of the things that I think about, I mean, this is sort of almost a broad comment on relationships, but it applies, I think, to football quite nicely and managers, is that it really doesn't work to try to force people to try and change into something different for a relationship to be effective. I'm not saying people shouldn't strive to improve themselves within, but people will sit
So
down
tough some
and
back on there, James. Yeah, just in case the waist was on your shot, I could tell her. Oh, we're skating on thin ice there.
everybody who's ever I mean every couple that's ended up splitting, you could talk to them and they'd all say, well, I wish the other person would just not do this, or I wish they would have just been like this or that. And I think managers fall into that quite funnily, because Ten Hag's not going to change who he is. There's just no way. I don't, people don't, in that respect, they don't change that much. He's not going to suddenly become a different person tomorrow to work with Ineos. He might, accept or bite the bullet on a few things to be a bit different. And I think that, that's why you want to get some things in writing. You want to get some things agreed where there is flexibility on both sides to work together. And I think I honestly think the reason I'm not totally surprised by them not having agreement on these contract things yet. And I think there's probably still some resistance because it's not done right away. Sometimes those resistances can be broken down with money. I mean, at the end of the day, that's usually how you solve some of these problems, is you pay more money and you get a little bit more willingness for someone to be flexible. But I'm not surprised, because I don't think it was quite as organized or as clean as they presented it when it finally came out, as like, oh no, we're just looking and but Ten Hag's perfect for us, because you don't get looking if things are perfect. And I think they probably ran into a situation where they were having trouble with the people they're looking at, and Ten Hag and his representatives are probably saying, enough is enough. This is getting a bit ridiculous. We need to know now if we're going to be manager next year or not.
This is stupidity to me, because first of all, far be it from me to critique people who are sporting professionals, business professionals, but there's a couple of things. One, I'd said last week on the podcast that the new contract wasn't essentially a new contract. In my opinion, it was essentially a contract to hire Ten Hag on their terms, right?
Yes. Yep.
And that appears to be what the case is. But the problem is, James, when you meet with 5, 6 different managers, and you come back and say, actually, you're the best, you now surrender the power of negotiation to Ten Hag.
Correct.
Well, you know what? Those preconditions that I was trying to agree to a month ago to keep my job, you can't find anyone else. Well, guess what? Yep. I'm not agreeing to that. So what are anyone going to do? They can't sack him. They can't. I mean, how embarrassing.
I know.
To turn around right now and say, well, actually, you're not our best guy. We're going to sack you. And we're going to come in for someone else. Like, to me, this is stupidity. Like, you get this agreed up front. You get an agreement in principle up front. Okay, these are the terms and conditions that any manager that works here is going to work under.
Yep. You
sign up to these. Okay, will you agree to that? No. Okay, well then we don't have to sack you. You're resigning, right?
Right.
But to me, showing up in Ibiza, going, actually, you know what? After all that, there, I wanna, I wanna, I want you to. Okay, well, if you do, guess what? Now you surrender power of negotiation to Eric Ten Hag because now
Mhm.
Eric Ten Hag is in a situation where he knows they can't let him go.
Yep. And that's
Uh,
that's where the
Ineos
comments come from.
But this is but
Yep.
this is stupid to me. Like
It
you
is
get to
stupid.
scrape a front, and you know some of the stuff that's come out has been a bit concerning about. I don't know if this net spend number that's being bandied about is accurate or not. Um, I would say that United don't have 200 million to spend. I would say out with confidence.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
say that if they were planning on spending a lot of money, you don't go about telling everyone that that's in your
Yeah.
budget. So
Yeah.
they're probably comfortable with this number being bandied about. But they have a bit of a problem, James, in that you can turn around and tell, I want you to play this way, play this way, play this way, but you have to give the guy the players.
Yep.
And we're talking about 3 players, but I think they did need more than that. The squad's too thin as it is.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at that and I'm going, even if you got a centre back, a midfielder, and a striker, you still need, in my opinion, some squad players to add it to that because that squad's been thinning out week by every window. Far more players are leaving than what's coming in. So to me, 3 players isn't enough.
Yep.
And it's and looking at this, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. Like I don't want to be someone to just constantly criticize his owners because I want this to work. I'm optimistic, but something is a bit alarming.
Yeah. Well, it is, and I've been positive on a lot of the things that they've done, but the way the manager thing went, by the time it reached like the end of the second week, it was almost they'd already messed it up, because took so long. If they hired someone quickly, then that's fine. But I think we're talking about and saying, if they go back to Ten Hag now, it's not an insult at Ten Hag saying they shouldn't, but it's exactly that point. They interviewed all these people. They're the boss. They flew down to him. I mean, that kind of tells you the position that they found themselves in. Instead of saying, okay, Ten Hag, come meet us. I mean, those are the simple little signs of in terms of negotiations, in terms of who has the power in a relationship, like, having to go show up on his doorstep, hat in hand, and say, oops, we messed up. And quite honestly, I think they thought they had Thomas Tuchel the week before. I think they thought they had him. Because
I
there
want
was
to
some
see
interest. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
in slight defense of Jacob Steinberg, and I know this isn't going to be popular, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to defend the guy at all, right?
Yep.
But the article that he wrote saying Ten Hag was going to be sacked after the FA Cup, that was what was being said by Ineos.
Hmm.
That's what was
Hmm.
being said by
They
people
made that decision
very, very
at
close
that time. Yep.
to the very top.
Yep.
And this has always been an issue for me in that when we were asking players and the representatives, they were saying they've heard nothing about him being sacked.
Hmm.
But then if you asked other people, that I highly respect that are in the journalism industry that know what they're talking about, that have really good contacts, they were saying otherwise.
Hmm.
So I wasn't sure. But to me, I think they were, Ineos had made the decision pretty much after the Crystal Palace game
Yep.
that
Yep.
they were going to replace him.
Yep.
And this is, I think, how diversity of viewpoint on a board when you're discussing someone's future is healthy. I think that's good. If everyone agrees, then it's not a proper evaluation process. There should be disagreement. That's good. But to me, this this looks really poor. This is not the
Hmm.
decisiveness that we were sold on. I can understand this with players, James. With James Branthwaite,
Yeah, things
looking
happen.
at alternatives with the Ligt and all that.
Yep.
That's exactly what they should be doing, right?
Yep.
If you want to keep a price tag of 80 million, fine, we'll move on to someone else. That's
Yep.
exactly what they should be doing. And so this is not, we're not still having this conversation at the end of July. But when it comes to incumbents, when it comes to people already at your club or things like that, and then as I said, I mean, there's not a confidence issue. There's a trust issue between the two.
Yeah.
It just doesn't look good.
Yeah, and I think there was a lot of support for Ten Hag on fans, but I also know, like I did a poll on Twitter and all of that as well, and I know that almost everybody at the same time, even with wanting Ten Hag to stay, would agree that you want your manager to be on the terms set out by the owners and directors above them. You don't succeed by accident. We've talked about this so many times, right? It's not an accident. Success is intentional, comes about from doing the right things. And at this point, the concerning aspect of it is it looks like, you know, either they have to compromise on what they feel is the right way to do things with their manager, which is not ideal for an owner, for directors, for those people. I mean, if you're hiring Barada and you're hiring Wilcox to be your guys, and they're saying this is how we want to do things, and you have to start compromising on that already, that sets you back. It just does. Or Ten Hag, fits into it and agrees and goes ahead. And I hope that's what happens, because that gives everybody the best chance of success. Or you don't find agreement at all and he enters the last year of his contract. And those are really the three scenarios now where we still have to wonder what's going to happen at this point in time. And that isn't the greatest thing. And I think it is a matter of, this is their inexperience on display. I think that a big factor.
Experience in football, I get. But an experience in negotiating contracts with professionals, I don't get.
I know.
That to me is basic common sense, James. Like that to me is not. Is that you have to be honest about that. That is poor.
It is, and part of what sort of the warning sign on it has been the Ashworth situation as well, because I know, of course, ideally they would have had him in to be the one pushing this whole thing. I mean, that's what you have your director of football in for, and that's at this point stalled to the point where we know it's. I think the view is there's no way he's in this summer at all. Like, period. They'll probably end up getting something done after the window, and that's probably what Newcastle want as well. But it's sort of just it wasn't. I would agree. We said once they hit the end of the season, these are the big decisions that they're really going to be judged on, and
these are the people now negotiating contracts with potential signings.
Yep.
I mean, does this give you confidence? If this is how they are retaining their own staff,
yeah.
Does this give you confidence in the competence of now going after players? Because those would give me confidence, or confidence that they are, this level of excellence, par excellence. They're bringing a whole level of professionalism to United.
Yeah,
I've yet to see that, to be honest.
Yeah, well, it's definitely brought me down to being in more of, like I was willing, like I think it was fair to give them the benefit of doubt on certain things and say they come in, they've obviously got good intentions. Let's see what they do. I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. I'm going to hold back on much criticism at the moment. I still don't want to criticize too much, but I'm at the point where I've had my faith shaken a little, I guess you could say, in that respect. But it's more like I need to see it now. We didn't get Tosin. There might have been good reasons for that, but I know they were very interested in him. The low bid for Gerard Braithwaite, one could say that's good. We're negotiating well. That's one way to paint it, and that might be the case. It might be, this is the money. We're not overpaying. The other aspect of it could be, are they completely misjudging what it's going to take to get the deal done? I'm not saying that's the case, but there are two ways to look at it, and we don't know at this point in time, which it is until we see them actually get something over the line, because it's June 17th, right? There's no transfer in yet. I'm not saying it's, there's the Euros and all that, but there's no transfer in yet. They don't have the new contract with Ten Hag agreed yet, and we've just finished that. We are getting close to where you start to say, this is a little worrisome. I think that there was 1 year in the last 10 where United didn't have a signing before June 30th, which was actually 2 years ago, I think, Ten Hag's first season. And even under the Glazers, they'd often get business done early, maybe the wrong players at times, but they would get some stuff done early on. I think Ineos need to get something done now to restore a little bit of confidence, in where things are headed, because if we're worrying about it, you can bet players, agents, and the people in the club themselves are worried about it too. A lot has been made of, when you read these articles about some of the fallouts with players and things like that, a lot has been made of the concerns players have had with how United have reinforced the team over the years and not following through on getting the people in, on people like Harry Kane, people like Declan Rice, on not getting the players that are needed in. It's a big concern. There's, we've seen some depart, but there's a lot of players at that club right now, high profile players with concerns that want to see something good happen. They want to see the statements of intent. They want to see what has been said is intended actually come to pass now. And I think we all need that. I think Ineos are coming up on really needing a win here shortly to fix things.
Yeah, and I'm not saying they should do gimmicky stuff.
Yeah.
Don't do because we want to appease fans or we want to make a statement signing and stuff like that. I don't believe that's stuff they should be doing. But
Yep.
they need to show a very clear contrast from what we've seen before. For them to start doing their jobs, they're asking other people to perform to exceptionally high standards. Well, they need to do the same. And I agree, they're not going to get Ashworth. Newcastle will not let Ashworth move to United before the end of the window. That would they can afford to make him sit there. I'm sure they'll get him in September, October. So the club has to function without him. And recruitment this summer is absolutely vital, not just to get back in the top four and to recover revenue, but to convince the players that are here that this is a club that is being serious about trying to win trophies. This is the whole thing that anyone said they were going to bring back. I'm, not angry yet. I'm just a bit irritated with it, where it's like, you have to judge things on its merits. And looking at some of the things they've done, it's easy to publish, mock pictures of the new Carrington, all that's great. But substantive, give me something that's real. And when I see Real Madrid bringing in Endrick and Mbappe, and I see all
and more,
and you're the European champions, like, where's our response? And some of the players that I'm seeing linked with United don't fill me with enormous confidence that these are players that are going to get United to that level. And Ineos will eventually be judged in the job that they do. Like I said, I'm still optimistic, but they have to be held to the same standard as everyone else. But it's time to get to work. As we said, their reign really began the day after the cup final. This is when things have to start moving. And United's first preseason game is just slightly less than a month away. That's a very short period of time.
Yeah, I think it's about 3 weeks till they start coming back. Yeah, players
so
start returning.
That means there's a lot of business has to get done and taken care of in between times. If we're still sitting in the same position we're in today, 3 weeks from now, I'd be very, very concerned.
Yeah.
And it's at that point I'd be expected people from the football club, be it Wilcox, or Barada or something, to come out and to at least elucidate what their plans are, what's going on, what to expect, because you can talk about what happened last season. For last season to not happen again, United are going to have to sign not just players, but really good players. I mean, you can't just bring in a left back because they're a left back and they're decent and because, they're in the last year of their contract. You have to bring a transformative left back in. You can't just bring a midfielder in because he's in the last year of his contract at Monaco. And he's decent. He'll do. These are players that are not going to take you to, that's not something you can build on because you're going to get rid of these players 2 years from now because they're not good enough. So you have to bring players in that 3 years from now are going to be players that you don't have to replace. It's so, I'm a bit concerned about that.
Yeah, for sure. And, there's obviously certain considerations, information we don't know in terms of, they're definitely tight before June 30th in terms of actually spending. But the thing is, that doesn't really change the factor of agreeing to deals either. There's the 3-year kind of rolling PSR things. And after the 30th of the month, it goes into the next year and they drop off this massive, massive loss of 21. It's 20 to 21, I think it is, right? No, 21 to 22, right? And that year has like 80, 90 million in losses, something crazy like that they have to drop off because they're actually like at the PSR cap, the profit and sustainability cap. So I can understand if they don't have a bunch of deals done like before July 1, but they should be getting there and they should be ready and they need to be good players. I think we cannot sign, they can't be Christian Eriksen, no offense to him, of course, but they can't be Christian Eriksen and Tyrell Malaysia deals that are going to transform us this summer because they're not. The team needs improvement. It's also going to lose a lot of players. We're going to lose Rafael Varane. He's gone, right? We lost Anthony Martial. Not that he contributed much, but we did need a player of his caliber when he was contributing. We do need that still. We're going to probably lose Casemiro, into the midfield. And even though he had a bad last year, we've seen how poor United can be when you don't have Casemiro, a player as good as he was his first season. It's bad. They need someone as good as Casemiro was his first season in there to fix up this midfield. And I don't know what they're doing with Mason Mount, but those are mistakes of the past. So yeah, they need some big things to come in there and the clock is ticking. I mean,
what's interesting on that, James, is it seems to me that Ten Hag is asking similar questions than what Bruno Fernandes is asking, and what other players are asking with Covenios. Okay, if you want me to stay, these are my conditions. Show me your ambition. Right?
There's a bunch
And
of them saying that.
right to ask that.
Yeah.
That's what you and I would be asking them, or any other United fan was asking them if you're in a room with them. Show me your ambition? So I don't want some parsimonious owner that is prioritizing the business. I understand that's important, but for you to live up to your commitments that you made, during your initial offering and whenever you took over the football club, that's going to require you recruiting top class players. And so far, it's been bumpy. But look, we'll see what happens. Hopefully by the 1st of July, 2nd of July, we're looking at one or two players that are close to coming in or in, that are transformative, not players that are squad players that been underwhelming somewhere else or decent somewhere else or decent for a mid-table team where you're like, oh, okay, he'll do. United don't need numbers; they need quality, not just quantity. And the players that come in, like we said, can't be players they need to replace in a year or two. Other comment from Ten Hag that I thought was quite interesting was his comment about Grealish and Rashford. Rightly or wrongly, I don't think a manager should be saying that publicly about Marcus Rashford. And I know there's lots of strong feelings about Marcus Rashford. Your people are entitled to feel how they want. I just don't think that is helpful. I don't, especially when there's two sides of the story about why his form dipped. I can't imagine
why he signed a new contract in the first place.
I can't imagine. Yes, some of it we've talked about on here. It was repeated in that long Laurie Whitwell article. Right, and some players were told Harry Kane was going to get signed and all this, which of course is true. They were told that, and then of course that didn't happen. We've been talking about that for a while on here. There were some other things that happened, but nonetheless, I just don't see why that's helpful and why when Marcus Rashford reads that high, that helps him. Say about Jack Grealish, that's fine. He's not your player.
Yeah.
But if that's Mikel Arteta talking about Saka or one of his Arsenal players that didn't make it, that would surprise me. Michael Richards, you saw this interaction with Cesc Fabregas, was trying to protect Phil Foden, who was an ex-teammate. I'm like, maybe that's not the right thing to say. Maybe you want to back your player. That to me was like, when we talk about his communication skills, sometimes I think it's an issue with culture, because the Dutch are very direct. Two, Ten Hag doesn't have a perfect command of the English language in the way some other Dutch managers do. I commend him immensely for the fact that he can speak English. I can't speak Dutch. And if I could, it would be pretty poor. So I acknowledge that, he speaks far more languages than I do, and I
Yep.
commend him for that. But sometimes I look at stuff like that and I'm thinking, is that a translation error? Did he mean to say it? Did he mean it to come across that way? And then you think, what is being said to players behind the scenes in the same way that maybe it lands differently. It's not meant that way. It's not intended that way, but I can easily see what that would piss players off.
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest criticisms of Ten Hag, because there's so much you can argue against in terms of the results, injuries, form, the things that happened on the pitch, right? Where a lot of them not his fault, the poor transfer policies, things like that. The one thing Ten Hag is ultimately responsible for is what he does, the way he talks to people, the way he works with people, and where I think everybody has commented on probably his biggest weakness is with these interpersonal relationships, especially with senior players. We saw a public comment from him, probably was the start of his problems with Casemiro last season. A public comment from him was the start of problems with Rafael Varane last season. The public comment that kind of went to a back and forth between him and Jadon Sancho, not taking sides on that, but there was a public comment there. It's not a good thing in that respect, and I think that this, his job is he's Manchester United manager. That's what's I promise you that Dutch TV show was not paying him the amount of money that he's getting paid as Manchester United manager. His job, he's United manager. His job isn't to be honest as a pundit on Dutch TV. And I think it would be really easy to say, yeah, Rashford is unfortunate to miss out, and he's an incredible player, and I think they could have maybe used something like he was offering tonight, which is true. They could have definitely used Marcus Rashford in the game yesterday if you watched it. He could have made a comment like that, simply backing up and protecting his own player a little bit. And I think that should be the default for any United manager and any manager of their team, is by default to back up and protect their players from the press. You want to be on the same side in a team. The biggest problems you end up having with teams is when the opponents of teams become the other people in the team rather than everybody else. And you want everybody else to be your opponent. You're fine to make the media your opponent. You're fine to make other teams your opponent. You're fine to do all of that. But you want everybody on the same team to not be fighting with each other. It's broken up more than a number of good teams have fallen apart on that. And when you're already struggling, little things get magnified. And I do think that's an area that needs to, improve, because there's a player where there's already needs to be some major things resolved this summer between him and the club. And you don't want to add any fuel to the fire and add more difficulty to it. I certainly, obviously it's a different relationship, but you wouldn't want a player coming and saying a manager should have done better with his tactics during the year, and I think that, it's not the same. You just want, does it help? The answer is no. And so it probably shouldn't happen.
Let's say one of the United players was doing an interview or doing punditry this summer, and someone said to them, that player, well, any of us have been looking at other managers, and that player turned around and said, well, yeah, when you have a really poor season like the one Ten Hag's had, then you should expect that.
Yeah. I don't think anybody would accept that.
Would be all right with.
Yeah, I doubt it.
And I wouldn't be all right with it either if you needed to said that, because that would indicate to me there's a personal issue.
Yeah.
Right. So to me, I just think that's really poorly advised. And I think that that's something that you don't need to feed this fire. There's going to be people who have different opinions on this. I respect that. But for me, that annoyed me a bit. It was like, why? I could have said, James, you and I, different opinions on Ten Hag. I believe probably just the right thing to do to keep him. Although I would say 3 days of the week I'm Ten Hag out, and 4 days I'm Ten Hag in. I'm not sure either way, right? But I would say probably just the right thing to keep him. But that, to me, when he did the Jadon Sancho thing, I didn't think it was helpful to do that publicly, because once you do it, there's no way back.
Mm-hmm.
When you're doing that in September, I don't see how that helps United, helps Ten Hag, it helps Sancho, and makes him harder to move on in January.
Yeah.
But And again, to me, I think that was uncalled for. That was, poor. Anyway,
Yeah.
I don't want to say too much about it, but the other stuff I loved. I
Yeah,
like him.
I didn't have a problem with the other stuff either, regardless at all.
Well,
That was probably the only thing that stuck out to me, like,
yeah,
as shaky.
after the cup final, I thought he was right to say you don't know anything about football. Certain people, I respect that.
Yeah,
I
no
want
problem.
a United manager to be confident.
Yep.
Just some of the comments were funny, but you know, I don't disagree with him entirely on Southgate. But when you're in a punditry seat and you're going after another manager, then he shouldn't be so sensitive when it's done to him.
Yeah.
Because, I know that he was irritated with some comments on TV about some of the things that was being said about him and about United, but this is the game. Okay, do we have any questions, mate?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the questions centered
Anything else?
around
Anything
this
else before we
specific.
get there?
Well, yeah, I mean, most of the questions will probably be answered if we address like these some of the striker targets, some of the center back targets and alternates, as well as striker targets and some of the things there. So probably we discuss that, and then I'll see if I have any
Okay.
non-answered questions. Yeah. So yeah, obviously United pursuing Gerard Brainthwaite. We've talked about him a lot over the year. I think about being probably the main target at center back, and like I said, we don't totally know yet at this point in time if that low bid is simply that's actually they value him, if it's a bit of a message to the market, like, we just don't have that much money. It probably serves a few decent purposes. Um, at the same time, if they misjudge it and they completely miss out, then it may not be that good. At this point, as I understand it, they're still considering whether to go back on a second one, but they are talking to Everton, so I think they kind of want to see, will they engage on this discussion. They're not going to pay 70-80 million for a player like that, and certainly they shouldn't. I think somewhere around 50, probably with add-ons getting to 50, is probably about the maximum that they're going to go on this. Probably the maximum they can go. Aside from that, there's a lot of names in terms of center backs that are being linked. The one that I think is really interesting in terms of, like you've talked about being aggressive, is the Lenny Euro one, because that is a young player that has immense potential. I mean, it has its similarities to a long time ago with the Rafael Varane, attempt to get him back in the day where he ended up at Madrid, and would have been great to sign him back then. And you got to hope if we end up with the English player this time, it turns out a little bit better than it did for Phil Jones at United. But that's one that does show ambition to try and compete to get that kind of player in. I don't think they're going to. I think odds are he goes to Madrid at the end of the day for so many obvious reasons.
Well,
But I
first of
would
all,
certainly,
10 years he'll sign for United down.
yeah, but certainly I'd like them to be in the discussion, and I think it's important for them to be in that discussion. And I think that is vital to it. So we'll see what happens with Braithwaite. I suspect they'll make one more offer, a little
What
improve.
about Delict?
Yeah, and then move on to alternates. Now, Delict, I think the problem is twofold. Number one, you have an instant aversion to the fact that he's another former Ten Hag player. I think they're probably going to want to avoid that for quite a number of reasons. At the same time, they've been watching him for a long time. His wages are really high. And I think that's the biggest reason that this is very, very unlikely to happen. He's on something like, he's over 250,000, somewhere in that range. I don't think they want to do that this summer for a player who's not.
Juventus and Bayern want to get rid of him. I would consider him. I don't watch enough.
Well, that too, it's like there's two clubs I get worried about when they start selling players, and it's Bayern and Madrid. Because usually there's a reason for it. And we've seen them, whenever Bayern are getting rid of somebody, you find out a year later that they've got like some chronic injury that they'll never get over, and their career is like on its way down. It's, there's very few examples that, barring like Tony Cruz, that of players that have transferred like that have worked out. So yeah, I would be concerned in terms of the cost. It'll be as much as Braithwaite, but 2 to 3 times the wages for a player that I don't think he's that great. He hasn't really tore up trees. He's not really in the top selections of starters. So unlikely. I think much more likely will be Todibo from Nice, who is a very good player. The fact that it's from a connected club is not, that's not why they're interested in him, but it certainly would make the deal a lot easier. And I think he's kind of sitting there, in the back pocket as a deal that can be done pretty swiftly if they move on from Braithwaite. And I think that's a good signing. I think he is a good player. He's very, very fast, something that is needed in the United team, good physical traits. So I'd be happy with that. I think I would be worried if they fall below Braithwaite, Euro, and Todibo. And that, to me, would show that they're not, bringing in Chalobah as their center back signing, to me, would be really concerning. I'd start to get really worried. You start bringing, that's the level of signing. What's that?
He was out until February.
Yeah. He's not like a top player in general. He's not a bad player, but that's exactly that kind of like, that's not the signing that's going to change anybody's mind about what's going on right now. So hopefully in those first 3 targets for sure that they get something done.
So midfield, obviously the question mark is what you need to do to replace Casemiro. You got any information on that?
Yeah, obviously, like, I think you hinted at a little bit. We've been linked to like Fofana at Monaco, who's okay. He's okay player. I think he's okay. There's, it's a sort of unknown how that would work out, but he's kind of seems like, again, sort of maybe the affordable
in the
option.
French Euro squad?
What's that?
Is he in the Euro squad for France?
That's a good question. I don't actually know if he is. They're playing right now, right? And let me see. Is he on the bench right now? Yeah, he's on the bench. He's on the bench. Yeah, so he's in there. He's okay. They were looking at signings even last summer. We talked about that. Fofana being one. I think they'd even tried to make an offer for. They tried to sign Ezekiel Palacios, who ended up having an amazing season at Leverkusen. So it's too bad they didn't make that happen. But it's a little tricky. There's not really a standout player I see in the midfield, that we've been linked with, or even that's available that I would say 100% is like a guaranteed win. There's Yeoman that's Sporting, that's okay, but I don't think they're going to sell him, and he'd be quite expensive for his quality. There's Marcus, there's not Marcus Thuram, the other Thuram at Kefren Thuram at Nice as well, who's a decent player, but I'm not sure that that he would be the one either. I don't have an easy option here in terms of like this perfect midfielder. There's a lot more good players at center back that they're looking at than I've seen linked in the midfield, and we've had very few names mentioned. And I'm wondering if they're. I mean, it's a little bit concerning, but I am wondering if they're looking at that and saying, don't know if there's a standout here, but you do have to get somebody, with Casemiro leaving, and you have to get somebody really good. So we'll see how that develops as well with with Casemiro leaving.
Forward, looks like Chelsea are progressing on Elise.
Sorry, one second. My AirPod died. Hold on. Second here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you now. We're good.
No, it's saying looks like Chelsea progressing on Elise.
Yeah.
I have no idea how Chelsea, who have spent circa 700 million net under Bowley since 2022, are going to be FFP PSR compliant. It seems a bit absurd.
Well, they sold themselves a hotel or something, right? Which is kind of ridiculous. It's
still, this is absurd.
Yeah.
I wonder who the hotel's going to play for.
Yeah.
Anyway, but this seems a bit ridiculous to me, but nonetheless, looks like they're progressing. And given United's other needs, I would be surprised if they were to try to match that. Very, very good player, but at this point, I'd be surprised if he's saying for United. So Sesko looks like he's going to stay at Leipzig. So what are we talking here, Xerxes?
Yeah, well, there's 2 interesting names, and this is obviously a priority. There's Xerxes, who's had a really good season. He's a lot of clubs are looking at him now, and he's close. I think he's really close to moving to Milan, and it's probably still more likely that happens. It's being held up a little bit by some agent fee things, and sometimes you get suspicious when agents are holding deals up, like maybe they don't actually want that move and they're trying to get other clubs involved. So we'll see. They really like him. We talked a lot in the past, right, about this potential of having a little bit more of a different profile of striker who's a little more like Harry Kane would have been. That may fit in a bit. And it seems like those are the names that United are being linked with now. Xerxes, one of those. Ivan Toney is another, who's a bit more experienced, going into the final year of his contract. But obviously, I think obviously he was banned for betting, but there's been some concerns about other aspects. He's a really good player. I don't know if you can spend 60 million on that. But those are the two most concrete names that we've heard with Šeško staying at Leipzig is Xerxes and Toney. And I think if they could get Xerxes in, they would. I think if Toney was available in the 40 million range, they would. Either one would give us something different. And it's a little bit up in the air there. But I do think they need someone different to Rasmus Højlund, right, to come in there and do something.
I don't know, man. I know we're entering in a different world now. Clubs are being smarter about how they spend money and who they spend it on. But to me, Xerxes, Fofana, Branthwaite doesn't say to me we're ready for the top four. I mean, I'm just talking about top four. Forget about the league, all that. Like that, those are three signings that, maybe with the exception of Branthwaite, if Bournemouth made, okay, that makes sense. If any mid-table team made, okay, Fulham made, okay, I can see it. But I understand that you're a bit short on cash, but I just said it's not exactly Xerxes or Mbappe.
Yeah.
Your other midfielder is free. That saved you a fortune.
Yeah.
And if you can't find decent money to pair somebody who didn't cost you a penny in your midfield, yeah,
I know. Yeah, I know. And
any of us, what football club are you trying to take over? Because
yeah,
this is not going to be a lot of fun sitting in 7th and 8th, because those are mid-table signings.
Yeah.
Brantwaite's a very good young player, but he's still got a lot of development to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched him in the game where United were at home, when they played against United. He was average, I'll be honest. I've seen him play. Haaland took him apart. Haaland's not lightning quick. He's a young defender that needs to develop.
Yep.
So he's going to make mistakes. He's not going to be ready right away to play consistently at the top level. And to me, it's like, I don't know, if your first summer you can't find the money to go out and bring players in that actually will transform your season next season, that's a big concern. I understand FFP, and all that. I get all that, right? And those are very real things that they have to comply with. But Ten Hag shaved about 100 million off that wage bill, and there's still lots of recruitment that needs to be made internally for staff, everything.
Yeah.
I don't understand if you're any of us are looking at these books going, if we take over this football club, PSR, FFP is going to restrict us immensely to be able to invest the money we're going to need to get this football club back to the top level. So it doesn't make sense. Because if this is the only impediment that United have where it's strangling their ability to recruit, this is a big, 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 big problem. This is a serious problem. Because if you want to get in the top four next season, those three signings aren't getting it done.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously there's a balance between maybe where they feel they were at, like whether healthy, how good the team is, but the other teams are obviously improving too. Some of the strategy looks a little bit like Arsenal, how they built it up in the beginning, because they weren't all, a lot of the players that they signed in the original kind of build up under Arteta were not big names. Obviously last summer they brought in Declan Rice as a transformative player, on top of that. But a lot of the players they brought in at the prior point in times were not necessarily of that level. And they built a pretty cohesive team. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. They haven't won anything yet. They haven't won a title.
One of the things, and Arteta in that time has won one
I
Champions
know.
League.
Well, and it was
the
I
first
know.
season of the Champions League. I'm not certain that this is the model that you really want.
I know. But it, we talked about it a couple months ago, and I remember your concerns there, but I don't know how it's going to work. But I was pretty sure this is the way that they were going to go. Buying younger players at the moment, and building up this way. If it works, it's great. If it doesn't, we'll know really fast. And but yeah, I mean, this is it's tricky. This is really challenging because it is a bit of a different world going into this with them, and we don't know really where it's going to end up if they sign these players, how good it's going to be. Because I agree on Braithwaite. Right now, he's not a world-class center back. I really like him, but he's going to have years of growing into that. Is he? I'm not sure he's better than Harry Maguire today. Different. I'm not sure he's better than Harry Maguire today. But this is kind of the challenge that they face in terms of buying now and buying for the future. But that's also weighed up against. You can see why there's concerns from players like Bruno Fernandes, who, as I mentioned before, where I was looking at it and saying, based on his age, he's going to want to be looking at it and saying, where are we in 2-3 years? Are we ready? Are we competing next season? Are we competing the season after? And Rashford and others will be in that same boat. And it's a challenge. It is. I don't know how it's going to work out. My suspicions are that it's going to take that next season is probably not going to be as good as people hope for. Almost no matter what, it's not going to be as good as people hope for. I don't think it is, and I'm not sure that that's it's just sort of the reality of it. I think. I like to be hopeful. You never know that sometimes players can make a great leap forward in the development and things like that, and everything. But I would be surprised if next year is as good as even Ten Hag's first season in terms of the outcome. I would be surprised if it is, frankly, overall. But
I don't understand why you would buy a football club, invest in a football club, to then say, let's lower expectations in our first season. That is so important for you to build credibility with the fans, to build momentum, to build credibility with the players, because the players have been on this treadmill for so long where they're like, look, unless we see substantive change, we're out. And now this is where, you're like a new manager coming in. You don't get to say to the fans, I just write off next season, it'd be shite, but we'll get better eventually. Any of us can't be writing off their first season and going, let's lower expectations. We're just going to finish 7th. But we're about to sack our manager last season for finishing 8th, but we're just going to finish 7th.
But that's what tells me that we're gonna get another clip here. We're gonna get
us on export them, and I cannot try this again. No, you can't be doing that because 47 the ball still hasn't dropped. You can't be doing that. You can't be writing off the first season you're here. I'm sorry. Like, no one gets to do that at United. There's never been a season where you get to say we're writing off this next season. No way. No way. They have to come in and make a material difference right away. This is what they promised. And so let me see you deliver on your promises. Let's see you show me the reason why you consider yourselves to be this organization that's sporting par excellence. Let me see it. And you're not going to sit there and do that with a couple of underwhelming signings. If you don't want to out the people you're sitting next to, the Glazers, for why United can't buy, then you take responsibility for it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But Manchester United need genuine top-class talent. I understand that's hard to get when you finish 8th, but they can't be signing players that are of a mid-table level and expect to finish in the top 4.
Yeah,
because, and you can't be sacking your manager in October when you give him 3 players that aren't ready for the top level.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And look, when I look at the targets, I can be optimistic about center back. I think the name that they've been linked with at left back, Kirkus, is a really, really good young player. And they have a good left back in Luke Shaw, who hopefully will stay healthy for at least some of the games. And
Yeah,
that's a good
hope
enough
is
player
not
to.
getting it on, James. Sorry,
No, for sure.
more than
I
hope.
think the midfield is where I'd have the biggest concerns because you really need someone good there. I mean, how many years has it been United have not properly built the midfield correctly? You know, I mean, it even dates back to under Sir Alex Ferguson not signing top class midfielders and making mistakes in that area. And it's the engine of the whole team when you compare it to the level of the midfield that Manchester City have had over the last few years, and even the level of the midfield that now where Arsenal did get it right in bringing in Declan Rice, and to top it off, you know, lucking into Kobe Menu and getting Bruno Fernandes, well, you're set up to slam dunk it if you can get a really good midfielder in. And I think that's the biggest area where I think I'm sitting there saying, I'd be fine with Braithwaite. I'd be fine if you bring in an Ivan Toney, but you have to get in a really good midfielder to back
This
this
is
all up.
also vital for Manu's development because if
Yes.
Manu is put in
Yes.
midfield with some average midfielder and they're getting ruined every week,
Yep.
Manu it'll destroy his morale, it'll destroy his confidence,
Yep.
and he needs to be playing off a top class player that he learns from. So this
Yep.
is something. This is so you know when you talk about wanting to build a team around Garnacho and Manu, who you send tells me who you're
Yeah.
competing with. If you're competing
Yep.
with Brighton or in Bournemouth, then send those players. If you're competing with the very top, it's not what you say, it's what you do. So let's see what they do. I want to get to one or two questions before we go.
Yeah.
This is an important question I want to get to that Natalie sent in because this is a fairly reasonable question.
Yeah.
Will there be a review of the women's team like they have with the men? Sorry, my eyesight's not the best. Put aims and ambitions on Mark Skinner, of course. That's a reasonable question. Why aren't they doing the same
Yes.
as Mark Skinner?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to some respect, they almost did kind of push it off a year, didn't they? If I'm not mistaken, they looked at it and said, "All right, let's give him an extension for a year and keep him around." Honestly, I don't think they know what to do with the women's team. And I think it is a fair question to ask what's happening with that and when are they going to put more focus on it, because I don't think there is much at the moment. I think
Yeah,
they're
no, we deserve
overwhelmed with. Yeah, and that's unfortunate. You know, I was watching like Laurie Whitwell and such was asked about the same question, and everybody's saying, yeah, obviously they're going to keep the women's team going, but nobody's really heard of anything substantial or
Nearly Earth is
concrete with
asking the
that.
same question, James, that Bruno Fernandes is
Yeah,
asking those
yeah,
ambitions, and that's a question you don't answer verbally. To me,
yeah,
I think that United women deserve a lot better. You need to get out of Leigh Sports Village. I would like to see when United move stadiums, maybe give them Old Trafford,
yep,
and give them reasonable facilities that are
yep,
commensurate with their level of football and with the investment, and not just a token investment, but serious investment and trying to be
yep.
successful. The women definitely deserve that.
And it
So
doesn't count against the financial rules either, as I understand it, right? The investments in the women's team, it's not counted in the same way. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it would be really good for them to come out with some of the money that Jim has put into the club and move some of it to doing just that. Um, I think they have to do something on it. The problem I look at is who has the experience in there of anything with the women's team. I mean, John Murtaugh, for his faults on certain aspects, he was pretty part and parcel to getting the women's team up and running, and he's not there anymore. They haven't replaced him with Dan Ashworth yet, who probably does have experience in this area, and he's not in. And that does worry me because I think it means it's not going to be taken care of until Dan Ashworth gets in there. That's the unfortunate reality of it that I don't agree with. But I think that is the reality of it, is that there's not going to be much done on it until Ashworth gets in the building. I think they even lost the women's director of football, if I'm not mistaken, as well, who departed at the end of the season, I believe. So it is an area of worry, and I know because I've gotten that question a lot too, and I wish I had a better answer for it. I think we all do. I'm not happy with that aspect either.
Joseph asks about the list of players, academy players that will be on the tour this summer. Do we know it? That's not out yet, but I would imagine it'll be significant considering the Euros. So I'd imagine
Yes.
somehow we'll be bringing the likes of Harry and Mass on tour, especially if
Collier for sure.
yeah. So I would imagine that you will see quite a bit of them on tour this summer. It's a great opportunity for them. It's as far as the list goes, I don't have it yet. No one knows who that is yet, but I would imagine, as we've seen before on tours, they're quite significant. Most of these questions we've already answered. Any conclusion to the injury crisis or NES's review? Well, nothing that's been published, but some of the solutions to that are obvious, and that is something that needs rectifying before the start of the season. So I think that's about giving greater resources to that department, and having better accountability, and making sure that they have sufficient staffing levels to do that appropriately, and they invest properly in equipment. This is not an accident that is declined. Is there a possibility of Eric Ten Hag? We've already addressed that. So we've addressed most of these. I know people want timestamps, folks. It's hard to do that because this podcast is supposed to take a format, but it very rarely does. And
it's a long look. It's also it's long form. It's long form It's a little bit hard to time.
Yeah, I don't have producers. I don't have any editors. I don't have all that stuff. They're just doing all this work for me. So I actually have a real job. And, being a pants is a 24/7 job. So, sorry. Anyway, no, seriously.
We just usually prioritize. We record. We try to get it out to people as quickly, and I don't really have the time to go listen through it all again. Usually, we're both running off to work as soon as we're finished.
Correct. Yeah, I know it's a lot of work. Sorry for that inappropriate humor. It's a condition of my mental state. Sorry. Give me a few mulligans. Once in a while, my brain certain the things I've done to it. So anyway, I'll stop digging and we'll leave it there. We'll be back next week, I think. So I hope you're all doing well. Enjoy the Euros. Thanks for downloading the podcast as always. The follows, retweets, and all that. Much appreciated. And we'll take it easy. Take it easy.
Sounds good.
Cheers,
see you later.
Cheers,
Yep.